Even Beaulieu, Nakana Benesi Kwe Nindijnakas, Megazin and Dodame, Mesquaga Mevazaga Egening and Donjaba. As Stephen said, my name is Susan Beaulieu, and coming into the building, it was interesting. My Anishinaabe name is Leading Thunderbird Woman, so I felt very at home with all the Thunderbirds around me today. I'm a citizen of the Red Lake Nation and currently the Healing Justice Director at NDN Collective. So, Heart has a friend named Spirit. Lydia Campen is my daughter, and she's 9 years old, and this summer her and I were having a conversation, and out of the blue she said this to me, and it just really hit me right here. And I asked her, I said, yeah, who said that? Who told you that? She goes, nobody, I just know it. And so in this spirit, and a lot of this talk will be talking about the importance of the remembering of all the parts of ourselves. I invite you to join me in starting with a heart-centered meditation. So I just invite you to get yourself into a comfortable position, whatever that feels like for you. If closing your eyes feels good, you can close your eyes. And maybe even just placing one or both of your hands over your heart center. And as you're breathing in and out, I invite you to bring that breath, that life force energy into your heart space. Using the power of your heart to call in and grow the energies of love, gratitude, or joy. And if it's helpful for you, you can bring to your mind's eye a person, a place, an experience, a being, someone or something that really brings this energy alive for you in your body. And as soon as you feel that energy come in, use the power of your breath to grow that energy. Feeling that energy vibrating through your body. Using your breath to grow that energy from the top of your head all the way down to the tips of your toes. And from a place of abundance, it's so much easier to give. And so inviting you, once you feel that energy of love, gratitude, or joy coursing through your whole physical body, as you breathe in, continue to grow that energy. And as you exhale, send that energy outward. You might want to send it out to those here in this room, maybe those online, friends, family, community, the world, wherever you feel that energy is needed, send that energy there. Taking one or two more slow, deep breaths into the heart center, sending that energy outward. And then once again, Maybe just feeling your feet on the floor, feeling the support of the seat or chair underneath you if you're sitting. And any moment that we need, our breath is there for us to help support us, to regulate our nervous systems, to remind us of the interconnection. And so just inviting you throughout this talk, anytime you notice big energy beginning to move in you, I invite you to use your breath. If you had your eyes closed, you can go ahead and open your eyes, bringing yourself back into this space. Really appreciate you all opening with me in that way, so miigwech. There we go. So my healing journey has really helped to situate me in the context of relationships in a way that prior to really being on this healing journey myself, I didn't understand. I'm a mother of 4. I had my first daughter when I was 19. My youngest is 5, so do the math. I've been a mom for a while, but my children have been one of my best and most challenging teachers. So any of you who have children can probably resonate with that. And beginning to understand the power and medicine of healthy relationships, what it means to be in healthy reciprocity, giving and taking equally, being present with one another. I remember as a young mom, when I would read to my kids at night, I would tick through the things I had to do after they went to bed. And I didn't understand the preciousness of that moment. But now, as a mother, sitting with my kids, being in the moment with them, that's medicine. The other thing that this healing journey has helped me to do is, prior to this, things were very performative, right? What are your titles? What training do you have? What makes you credentialed to do something? And so there was an awful lot of imposter syndrome. And on this healing journey, an important grounding piece for me has been coming back to values. The values of my ancestors, and grounding in values and moving from that place, which is a very different place than, all the titles and the degrees and all of those things. And I actually was working on a PhD doing this work, and I just, there was a part of me that said, I want to give my energy to this work on healing. I could give it to the PhD. But who does that really benefit? And so making that shift and being able to ground how I give my energy in a way that aligns with my values and the direction that I feel that I'm getting from my spirit. And this, of course, then allows me to focus on the gifts that I can bring and how I can share them. And, anybody who saw me backstage here knows, being in this position is super uncomfortable for me. I'm just going to name that. But I don't get up here because I enjoy it. I get up here because I feel like maybe I have something to share that's maybe a little nuanced in a way that maybe folks haven't heard before. And I see myself as a seed planter. So I hope to plant some seeds today. So for the last maybe 9 years or so, a lot of my work has been focused on helping our Indigenous communities understand the impacts of trauma. Anybody who's learned anything outside of the formal education system about what happened in North America, the United States, and Canada to the Indigenous peoples knows that there were a whole bunch of horrific things that happened. And I'm not going to get into all of that today, but one of the things I like to remind folks is if somebody in a family experiences a trauma and it's a healthy family and they can support them, that person's able to move through it. If a family experiences a trauma and they're in a healthy community, that community is able to help them move through it. What happens when the whole community is traumatized? Who holds the space for healing then? So our Indigenous people, throughout the years, the generations, have had a massive compounding of trauma. Because each generation that wasn't able to heal, that energy of trauma gets passed on. And it wasn't until in the United States, 1978, that Indigenous people were even able to legally practice our religious and spiritual ways. That was 1 year before I was born, so not that long ago. So as I've come to understand what trauma is, there's been a couple folks that have been really influential in that for me, Dr. Thomas Hubel and Dr. Gabor Mate. And what really resonates with me in how they talk about trauma is that it is an energy. And it's an energy that's very old, thousands of years old. And every single one of us in this room, online, and beyond carry that energy, whether we know it or not. And it impacts our lives in so many ways, whether we know it or not. And I understand trauma now not as the thing that happened to me or to us as a collective, but rather the way that when we don't have the supports that we need, that energy ends up getting stuck. And so I understand healing as, how do we begin to work with all of this stuck energy? Maybe we're numb to it. Maybe it's so repressed that we don't even know it's there. And there is a wisdom in trauma, and I know Gabor talks a lot about that. And so if you haven't read his book yet, I'll just put a plug in for that now. Literally one of the best books on trauma and healing that I've ever read. So highly, highly recommend it. Actually, I'm going to go back one more. The other piece that I want to add to this is when this energy is so repressed, suppressed, or numb, we no longer feel it. So there's a lack of felt sense. And this energy gets stored in our physical body, it gets stored in our hearts, it gets stored in our minds and thinking patterns, right? And so when we can, so with trauma then, the opportunity is to begin to work with this energy, to feel again, to once again feel those connections even to the difficult things. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Something I've been thinking a lot about lately is balance. And I'm not a surfer, I'm not a skier, and I'm not a skateboarder. But what I do know about all three of those is that balance is essential. Without balance, you can't do those things. And it's not a balance like you find the balance and then you have it and then you just do your thing. It's a moment by moment. And I think about that in life, the importance of coming back to the present moment and finding balance now, and then finding balance now, and finding balance now. I think sometimes the way that these balances, the imbalances can show up personally is in sort of like all or nothing thinking. And we have sayings for folks, right, like Debbie Downers, Pollyanna, all or nothing. You either all you see are the bad, quote unquote bad, or all you see or want to focus on is the good. But I think every one of us in this space today can recognize that life is both. There's so much beauty and magic around us every single day, and there's so much pain and grief around us every single day. And if we can't come to a place of balance within ourselves and that felt sense of connection, we're not able to tap into those gray areas, the nuance. In order to be able to see those gray areas, we have to stay curious. It can't be this or that. What's the space in between? Another thing I've come to understand is how trauma really creates certain mindsets. And if you look around, we see these mindsets everywhere. Scarcity mindset, hierarchy mindsets, othering mindsets, things that allow us to do things to ourselves and to others that if we understood the truth and reality that we are all interconnected, we could and never would do those things. These mindsets keep us in survival mode. Trauma, unresolved trauma, keeps us in survival mode. How many of you feel like the world is in survival mode? Yeah. This literally, everything that our whole world, our societies have been built on unresolved trauma energy and these mindsets. And the invitation in healing is to begin to understand it, to work with it, to release it, and to transform it. So, and these imbalances can happen individually, but they also can happen collectively. And I've been told and I've experienced that life is a mirror. It shows us the energy that we're putting out. And so when I look out at this sort of like collective consciousness and the current state of our world and the fact that we've created a sixth mass extinction, tells me a lot about our collective conscious and unconscious mind. My husband and I were talking a couple weeks ago on a drive back from the Twin Cities, and we were talking about how humans are truly the only species on this planet that can live isolated or disconnected from the earth. I mean, nowadays you can live in your home and never leave if you don't want to. You can have anything you want delivered to your home, even though you don't know where any of it comes from. There's not another species on this planet that can do that. They remember and feel every moment that interconnection. And so again, the opportunity for us as the human species is to reconnect. But what I've also learned in this healing journey and the work that I do with others is that we cannot connect to others until we first connect to ourselves. I just want to touch briefly on this idea of spiritual bypassing, because I know it happens a lot, including in these psychedelic spaces, where we only want to focus on the good vibes only, right? But the truth is, again, unless we're willing to go into the shadow individually and collectively, we're going to keep perpetuating the same things. So if we want to get to this place that we ultimately, I think, all want to create, where we feel a sense of relationality and connection, and there is love and compassion and support for all beings on this planet, it requires us to go into our shadow, our individual shadows, our collective shadows. And it also requires us to get comfortable with discomfort and change. You know, the way our brains work, our brains are a prediction machine. They like to know what's going to happen, and it bases what's happening now based on what happened in the past. Most of what we experience every day is the brain replaying old experiences. Oh, an apple tastes like this, so I eat an apple, but I'm not actually tasting this apple. My brain's like, oh, this is what apples taste like. So the invitation is to continue to come back to the present moment and experience what's happening right now. And oftentimes what's happening right now as we're healing is really uncomfortable. Emotions that we've not allowed ourselves to sit with before. Thoughts and patterns that just go in our mind. Sensations in our body. Pain, right? So then we try to get out of that because it's uncomfortable. But I think of this, anytime I'm feeling comfortable, it's because it's something I've already done. If we are trying to do something different and create something different, we have to learn how to sit with discomfort. So one of the things that, again, on my own healing journey and working with others that has been such a powerful tool is the medicine wheel. And many indigenous tribes across North America have some form of this. It might look a little bit different, but the basic framework of the medicine wheel is that we are first and foremost spiritual beings in human bodies, having human thoughts and human emotions. If we were, say, a dog, we would be a spirit in a dog body, having dog thoughts and dog emotions, right? So understanding that we are all of these parts, and the critical nature of having balance in all of these parts, understanding the language of each of these parts, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. There's so much wisdom in the medicine wheel, and although it is an indigenous framework, I would suggest that each and every one of you come from indigenous people somewhere in the world. People who were connected to place, to land, to plant and animal relatives. Every single one of us, our ancestors came from somewhere that they were deeply connected to. So a couple things on this. One is, I don't know about you all, but I know I've experienced in the education system an over-identification with the mind. What can you measure? What can you see? Logic, critical thinking. I remember when I went post-secondary, PSEO, post-secondary education, and I took 2 classes, critical thinking and logic. There was nothing on learning how to be with difficult emotions, navigate emotional energy, right? So there's this over-identification with the mind and with thoughts. That our thoughts are real. Our thoughts can create reality, but we have an awful lot of thoughts that we think, and we think a lot, that aren't grounded in anything that's real. And I would argue a huge piece of that has to do with the fact that the mind relies on information from the body, it relies on information from the heart, and it relies on information from the spirit. And so if we don't feel that sense of connection to those other parts of ourselves, the mind has some wild ideas, not founded in actually anything that's real. The other thing is, when I think about what we train, what we prize, what we reward, it's often thinking over feeling. I can't even tell you how many times as a child I was told, you're too emotional. As if feeling big emotions was a bad thing. As if being able to feel the energy and emotions of others was something to be ashamed of. What I've come to understand in my own healing journey and in the work that I do is that my ability to feel deeply is my greatest superpower. It helps me be able to connect with the grief, the loss, the sadness, the darkness, all of that other people experience, because I've been there. I've experienced that. As a child, I was put on Prozac at 11 for depression. Tried to take my life several times, wanted an eject button so badly. So I understand that. But I also, through this healing journey, have come to understand the beauty, the magic, just the overwhelming, I don't even know what the word is, but of everyday life. And so I can understand and resonate with that as well. So as I think about these parts of ourselves, early in my journey it was like, how do I know what's spirit when it's talking? Because one of the things I know too is that the mind, because it goes on past experiences, and a lot of my past experiences were based in trauma and fear, boy, the mind would tell me really scary things all the time. I would feel something and then, the mind had a really scary story for me about that. So with spirit, what I've come to understand is that spirit is more about that quiet intuition. When I have a really difficult decision to make about something, I'll do a short heart-centered meditation, dropping into my heart space, because heart has a friend named Spirit. And then ask myself the question, should I do this, yes or no? If I feel a sense of expansiveness in my body, that's Spirit speaking, yes. If I feel a contraction, that's also Spirit speaking, saying no. Now, the nuance in it is that I had to learn to read that before the mind got in. Because as soon as I felt the contraction in my body, the mind had stories about that. I'll say this really quickly just because I have time. So I came from Minnesota. We flew in on Thursday, but Wednesday night, our 5-year-old, he has night terrors. And he was having a lot of them Wednesday night. And then my 9-year-old, Lydia, when I gave her a hug as her brother had woke her up because he was crying, she said to me, she said, I don't want you to go. I'm going to miss you. So my mind right away was like, oh, maybe these are signs you're not supposed to go. Maybe the plane's going to crash. Maybe that'll, right? And so I had to stop the mind, drop into the heart and ask, should I go? And the answer was a yes. So learning the language of Spirit, that intuition, that just deep knowing, just that quiet knowing is important. That's how we can begin to tune into Spirit, the language of Spirit. I think of the language of the body as sensations. What sensations are we having in the body? And what's the biofeedback that we're getting? You know, if our heart's racing, or our palms are sweaty, or if our breathing is nice and relaxed, like all of that is information. So the language of the body I think of as sensations. The language of the heart are emotions. And the language of the mind are thoughts. And so all of these things are energy. And energies that with enough practice we can learn how to use, how to navigate in a way that helps us break out of old patterns and step into the new. Let's see. So, as I think about the work that I do, it's very informed by my own healing journey. And I know for a fact I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing or standing up here today if I had not had experiences with plant medicines that have helped me to understand the level of healing that I needed and continue to need, the recognition that it's an ongoing journey and process, but also the integration of what I learn in those journeys. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, the importance of that. But one of the things that I've come to understand in working with sacred plant medicines is that it really helps us to be able to feel that sense of connection to all those parts of ourselves, to have the wisdom of the Spirit coming through and to actually be able to hear it without the mind, the chatter of the mind, to feel the sensations in the body, and to move some of that energy that's maybe been stuck and stored for decades in our bodies. To be able to notice the patterns and thinking of the mind, especially those that maybe aren't so helpful, and helping us to wire in new patterns and pathways. That takes repetition and experience. And, you know, somebody up here earlier said this, and I've heard others say it, how, you know, having a psychedelic experience can be like however many therapy sessions in one night. So in a journey I had maybe 5 years ago, I had an experience of that where it was like, and many of you who maybe have done medicine have had a similar experience where you're literally going through the same thing again, and then again, and then again, and then again. And the reason for that, I believe, is because the medicine is helping us to wire in new patterns and pathways. The brain wires through repetition, right? The more you do something, the more automatic it becomes, the less we have to think about it. Let's do a sort of fun thing that I tend to do when I talk to groups. So everyone, if you have your arms crossed, go ahead and just like uncross them and shake them out a little bit. And then go ahead and cross your arms and notice what arm is on top, right or left. Everyone got it? Okay, so go ahead and shake your arms out again. And then cross them the other way, so the other arm is on top. What are you noticing? How many of you had to think about it? I remember when I first started doing this, I did. And then I did it enough in doing presentations that like crossing them either way, I don't have to think about it and both feel natural, right? So repetition creates the automatic responses. So medicines help us to wire in new patterns and pathways. The other things that medicines do is they help us feel again. All of these emotions that we've repressed or suppressed for, again, could be decades. Emotional energy is energy in our bodies. And Gabor's book talks about how this repressed emotional energy impacts the physical body and creates dis-ease and illness. So that's the other thing about all of these parts of ourselves is they are interconnected. They impact and affect one another. And so working with sacred plant medicines allows us to experience all of these parts of ourselves in a way that is hard to access outside of the medicines because of all of the programming and the conditioning and all of those things. The other thing that medicines help us do is to be able to look at our shadow, to be able to do some of that deep inner work, those places that are hard to go to. Whether we want to go there or not, the medicines take us there, because that's where our work is. But one of the things I've recognized in my own healing journey with doing shadow work is that some of our greatest gifts are also in the shadow. Remember how I told you people used to tell me I was too emotional? And now I understand. I suppressed that. I push that into my shadow. That's not accepted in my family or in my community or at school or when I'm playing basketball, right? And so in the healing journey, being able to tune back into that, reintegrate that part of myself and take that in as a superpower. The other thing, again, because all of this is energy that we're working with, in the medicines, we learn how to be with difficult things. I had a medicine journey recently, and a beautiful reminder that it gave is like, with all of this grief in the world, like I was just really, really feeling it and feeling so like under it and heavy. And the medicine reminded me, be with it, don't become it. And as I allowed myself to be with that really difficult, heavy energy, a shift happened. And what came in was compassion. And from compassion, love. And that energy then was transformed, right? So in being with these things that we often don't want to feel or be with, and really being able to be with them, we can actually transform that energy. And once that energy is transformed, it can become insight, or maybe it just then is ready to be released. So in medicines too, the ability to have that energy be able to leave our body, whether it's through shaking, whether it's through crying, whether it's through laughing, whether it's through, there's many, many ways that this energy can be released from our bodies, from our hearts, and even from our minds. Something that I learned early on in working with medicines is I love to learn. Which is probably why I have a huge student loan debt. So anyway, because I really believe like you learn by going to school. But what I've learned is that life is school. Like I don't have to pay somebody to teach me stuff. Like so anyway, that's a whole nother tangent on education I won't get into. But the medicines help us be able to shift what we know up here, what I call knowledge, into embodied wisdom. And what I mean by that is if it's just up here, something we can regurgitate, but we don't have any experience with, then it's just a concept. And for me anyway, when something's just a concept, I don't know what to do with that. If I can't feel it as a sensation, as an emotion, as an intuition, I don't know what to do with that. And so the medicines have continually shifted things that I learned up here from knowledge into embodied wisdom. And that embodied wisdom then allows me to be able to take it, to move it forward in my everyday life, to integrate it, and to create transformation and change. So again, that felt sense for me has been an important piece of shifting knowledge into wisdom. So I sort of talked about these pieces of like what medicines can help us do, create greater awareness of our thinking, of suppressed, repressed emotions, having insights, being able to release energy, being able to express things that, you know, needed expression at the time, but there was nobody there to support that expression. So these are ways that I think plant medicines help us to be able to reintegrate these parts of ourselves and to remember these parts of ourselves. So I know I touched on it some, but I feel like often in the psychedelic area, people are so focused on the experience itself. And sometimes we see people going in for another experience and 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 another experience. But they're not taking the time to digest and integrate what the medicines show them. And without that digestion and integration of that, again, we can't bring it into this reality and realm. There's no change. It just becomes an experience, cool experience we've had that we can talk about with others. But what I've also found in my work is when I can talk about something and I have an embodied experience of it, people hear it differently. There's a different energy that goes out when what we say and what we do aligns. And so there's a power in that, in integration. If we want to see change, and we're working with medicines to try to help make that happen, then a huge part of it is the integration. What do we do with what we've learned? Another thing I think that isn't talked about enough is the importance of reciprocity. And so reciprocity, I think of like when we do that integration work, when we're able to help bring what we learned into this reality and realm to help create change, that's a form of reciprocity. When we don't do that, to me, that's a lack of respect of what the medicines showed us. I also think how we respect, protect, and care for these medicines and the indigenous peoples who have held the wisdom of these medicines for thousands of years is another important form of reciprocity. And when we think about the world, our Mother Earth, the planet, what are we doing in this integration and as part of reciprocity to help support her health and well-being? I'm going to have to probably turn around to read this because I don't know if I need glasses, but I can't see it up there. I really love this quote by Oriana. Maybe I can't turn around because then I can't, I'm not in the speak. Thank you, Stephen. Is it on? Thank you. Psychedelics and plant-based medicines are powerful tools in the process of healing, particularly for the most marginalized folks living under empire who are underserved, underrepresented, and experience the highest rates of violence. Marginalized communities already have limited access to healing spaces, so I think it's important for folks invested in justice work to center and prioritize what non-traditional forms of healing look like for these communities. Thank you. And I believe with every cell in my being as an Indigenous person that the very structures, ways of thinking, colonialistic ways of thinking, capitalistic ways of thinking, hierarchy ways of thinking, those governments and structures that created the harms in our Indigenous communities in the first place should not get to determine how we heal and with what we heal. And so one of the things, as the Healing Justice Director, currently building out my team of Healing Justice folks, which I'm super excited about, but one of the things that we want to try to bring to our Indigenous relatives are opportunities to sit with these medicines, to do the preparation, the ceremony, and the integration, to have all of those pieces to help support the health and well-being of not just the individuals, which I think is another sort of like area that psychedelics have been going into in like strictly individuals versus like the collective. What does it look like for families to sit with these medicines, for people across the community to sit with these medicines? How then can they support each other on the journey? Because many of us who've sat with medicines and maybe didn't have those supports afterwards, sort of floundering around, trying to find our people to help support, right? There's more than one way to work with these medicines, and I think as Indigenous people, we want to be able to determine what that looks like. And so what does it look like for others who want to help support this work to provide financial support, policy and advocacy support, giving like genuine seats at the table, not tokenized, you know, one person, one Indigenous person here, one BIPOC person here, but really giving us places and spaces at the table to be able to bring our wisdom, our ancestral knowledge forward. And so I've come to understand, although I work with plant medicines, whenever I have an opportunity, and I feel super grateful, and I know I'm very privileged that I've been able to do that, I've come to understand that life is the ceremony. Life is the ceremony. And what would happen if we all began to live our lives, moment by moment, as if we were in ceremony, every day, setting an intention when we wake up? What might shift? What would shift in your life? What might shift in your family? What might shift in your place of work? What would shift in your community? And what could shift around the world if we lived recognizing life as the ceremony? And a message I got this past November, not this November, clearly this November just started, but past November, we were able to go to Colombia, to the finca, and one of the really important messages that the medicine reminded me of is, the medicine is inside. We are the medicine too. And so rather than always looking externally, how are we bringing our focus inward and recognizing our own medicine and bringing that forward, recognizing that being able to sit with somebody who's experiencing deep grief and loss, that's medicine. So I'm ending with this quote again because I love it so much. But I hope that you remember that heart has a friend named spirit. And how do we do more intentionally dropping into our heart space and the wisdom of our heart and being able to tap into our spirit through the heart? And he's probably not here, but I wanted to also end with this quote from Gabor. Thank you, Stephen. Optimism of the heart and soul, which are the birthplace of will. So there was clearly a part before that, but it's important to recognize heart and soul. These non-rational parts of ourselves know things about human potential and the nature of life that are untouchable by even the smartest intellect. There is so much wisdom in our hearts and in our spirits. And if we want to create the type of change that we want to have, we can't do it with the same level of thinking, right? What Einstein said, the same level of thinking that created the problem. So how are we dropping into our heart and spirit to understand a new way and to move forward in a new way. Miigwech.
Susan told me just backstage there that she kind of prefers to be, doing things from the background, but I think this works pretty darn well. Thank you, Susan. We have 4 minutes and 32 seconds left if anyone has a question for Susan.
I also welcome reflections, because I think there's so much to be learned from each other. So any reflection also that you have, something that landed in you, we would love to hear that as well.
Okay, I'm coming over here.
Question, or what advice do you have for people who are not met with openness about these medicines within our Indigenous communities?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and those of us who've been Indigenous folks who've been trying to help move this work forward, we've encountered a lot of resistance in certain pockets of our communities. And one of the things that I understand about that resistance that we come up against, because we hear a lot of times things like, we have our own ways, right? And I understand that as a trauma response, because so much of our culture, they tried to eradicate it. There's this holding on. But we've also had conversations, those of us who've been trying to move this work forward, is like, so these ceremonies that our ancestors have done for thousands of years didn't just like drop from the sky. Ceremonies were created to be able to help support needs in the community, in the collective. And so as we think about the level of trauma in our Indigenous communities today, it is beyond anything that our ancestors experienced, right? Because it's collective, it's compounded through the generations, and our spiritual folks are overwhelmed with the need. And so there's a great need in our communities today for the emergence of new ceremonies, new practices and pathways that can help our people to be able to remember those parts of themselves, spirit, heart, body, and mind. And the other thing is that we've also found that sharing some of the studies, and this is also where we would love to, as Indigenous people, begin to do our own studies, right? But being able to share some of the studies that are out there in psychedelics, because our communities are ravaged by substances, opioid, fentanyl, all of these things, right? It was alcohol, like all of that, suicide, depression, complex PTSD, all of these things that medicines can be so helpful for healing. And I don't think there's a single one of us in our communities that either haven't experienced personally or don't have a close family or friend who's experienced one of those things. So I think beginning to talk about it, we also have some folks that we're currently like trying to figure out how we create a psychedelic conference online to go specifically for our Indigenous relatives, to begin to share this information out in a way that hopefully begins to plant more seeds. There's some resonance and there's more interest. So I think we go, how I understand is like we go where the energy sort of leads, where spirit leads. And I've seen over the years opening up in spaces that I didn't expect. So I always hold on to hope too. Great question, Miigwech.
Thank you again, Susan, for sharing your wisdom and your heart. Much appreciated. One more hand for Susan, please.
This is an appointment of ours. Please don't go anywhere.
You get the prize for
you.